Hi everyone, my name is Fabian, and I'm here to talk to you about Mark Sanders, the new school board member on the Community Schools of Frankfort School Board. Before I get into this, I know this is likely going to be a controversial video, so all I ask is that you please watch the whole thing before you make a comment, and I just want to thank you in advance for taking the time to hear me out. Now, let's get on with it. Mark Sanders is the lead pastor at an evangelical Christian church here in Frankfort, Indiana, and that's known as Faith Family Church. He's married to Connie Sanders, who's one of the teachers at one of our schools. As a citizen of Frankfort, I wanted to do my due diligence and find out what he might bring to the table as a member on the school board. So I looked through Mark's, Connie's, and the church's Facebook pages to find out what kind of values they had. There wasn't much to see on the church page, but there was some things to look at on Mark's and Connie's Facebook pages. As someone who cares very much for the First Amendment and for the separation of church and state, what I found on Mark's Facebook page left me feeling concerned that maybe these things weren't exactly important to him. In a post celebrating his new position on the school board, he claimed that the two anchors to a thriving community are strong churches and strong public education. Now, I know a lot of you are most likely Christians, and you might be happy to hear something like this, but I wonder how many of you would be upset if instead of churches, he said mosques. While I agree that strong public education is necessary for thriving communities, I don't think that the statement that strong churches are needed is something that is based in reality. In fact, why don't we examine the best states to live in and how religious they actually are? Smile Hub published a study in August of 2024 looking at each state and how religious each one was. I compared that to the top 10 states according to U.S. News and World Report. In order, the top 10 states overall and their respective religiosity ranking are Utah ranking near the middle as 27th most religious, New Hampshire ranking as second least religious at number 49, Nebraska is the 25th most religious, Minnesota ranking higher as 14th most religious. Idaho was in 32nd place. Iowa in 24th. Vermont was the 4th least religious in 47th place. Washington in 35th place. Florida was ranked as the 19th most religious. Massachusetts was the 6th least religious state in 45th place. In contrast, Alabama was the number 1 most religious state, but it was ranked as one of the worst states overall at 44th place. I understand I went to great lengths to correct a statement that Mark most likely didn't even put that much thought into. It's something you'd expect most any pastor to say, but the reason I did is because, as I said before, the First Amendment and the separation of church and state are important to me. There are people out there working night and day to erode that barrier and to break down the First Amendment. Unfortunately, that includes people Mark is actively giving a platform, but we'll get to that soon enough. As the saying goes, if you give an inch, they'll take a mile. I found that to be true when it comes to some religious leaders trying to insert their beliefs into government. As a pastor, many people look up to Mark, and he has a great deal of influence among his congregation, as does his wife. With that much influence, I believe that one should take great care in what they share online and whose voices they amplify. In fact, he believes the same. Mark made a post warning others to be careful about the voices they listen to, that just because they have a firm opinion or are in a position of authority doesn't mean they're right or wise or want what's best for the community. Do some research, he asks. There are many who are seldom right, but never in doubt. You've more than likely heard it said, don't ignore the plank in your own eye to point out the speck of sawdust in others. I believe this applies to Mark. Mark and Connie both seem to follow or share posts from people who are known to mislead or lie to others. Though the post itself wasn't very offensive, Mark did share a post from Matt Walsh, who has lied about trans suicide rates, among other things. Not to mention, Matt Walsh is, at the very least, weird, but at worst, creepy. In a now deleted blog post, he suggested girls as young as 16 should marry and become pregnant, saying the problem is not per se teenage pregnancy, it's unwed pregnancy. He argued that girls who are still in high school want biologically and metaphysically and with everything in their body, they want to settle down. They want to start a family. And he believes that 16-year-olds are adults. I really hope I don't have to debunk all of that for you, but if need be, I will. In addition, this post is about J.D. Vance, who couldn't admit that Trump lost the 2020 election and who complained about fact-checking and defended the story about Haitian immigrants eating cats and dogs. By the way, if you didn't know, the woman that initially made that claim has retracted it. In Vance's own words, "If I have to create stories so that the American media actually pays attention to the suffering of the American people, then that's what I'm going to do." Mark, you know this is wrong. You yourself said, "When we listen to and support gossips and lies, not only can we destroy people's reputations and potentially their lives, if we're not careful, we'll find ourselves eventually lying, just like the ones to whom we listen." Why would someone need to create stories if the truth is already bad enough? My guess is that if someone needs to create stories, it's because they're trying to push an agenda. Whichever side is doing it is wrong, Democrat, Republican, or any other side. I would hope most people aren't okay with deliberately lying, especially Christians, seeing as it's one of the 10 Commandments. As for Connie, well, she likes and follows quite a few right-wing grifters, such as Jesse Waters from Fox, Ben Shapiro, co-founder of the Daily Wire, which employs Matt Walsh, and one of Ben's acquaintances, Dana Perino, and Fox News. I'm not going to go into detail in this particular video on why those people aren't to be trusted, but you're more than welcome to message me if you want to talk about it in a civil manner. I find it disheartening to see that these untrustworthy sources of information are the ones that Mark and Connie listen to. Perhaps they know that these people aren't to be trusted, but they go along with it anyway because it serves their agenda as well. Of course, I can't say for certain that that's what it is, but it wouldn't be the first time that pastors have used their congregation's faith against them. Heck, Connie came this close to outright telling everyone to vote Republican because it was biblical. She framed it as if people were voting for Kamala just because she's a woman, which I hope you know isn't true for probably 99.9% of people. But hey, I'm sure it's very biblical to cut funding for Catholic relief services that are for desperate people living in desperate situations, struggling day by day, hour by hour, according to Bishop Gerald Kay. She says that she voted to make all the women that made it possible for her to vote proud. So I really have to wonder what she thinks about the SAVE Act that was proposed by the Republicans that she praises so much. At worst, the SAVE Act could take away the right for tens of millions of women to vote, and at best, make it that much harder to exercise that right. Now, all of that's concerning enough, but what I'm really here to talk about is the men's conference that is coming up that's been plastered all over Mark's and Connie's and the church's Facebook page. And you should really be concerned about the people who are speaking at this too. There's one particular guest at the men's conference that I refer to when I'm saying that there's people who are trying to get rid of the barriers between church and state and who are attacking the First Amendment. Let's begin with the person that I could find the least information about, Terry Thompson. He's the leadership development pastor at Rock Point Church in Crawfordsville, and he's the founder of Small Church USA. Here are just a few of his values based on what I found on their websites. He's against gay marriage. He's against intercourse outside of marriage. He is against the LGBT community at large. He rejects the idea of any and all exceptions for abortion. And it seems that he believes people are born either biologically male or female. From what I found on Faith Family's website, Mark also rejects gay marriage and believes people are born male or female. Very quickly, I just want to show you how unpopular these stances actually are. A tiny 8% of people reject any and all exceptions for abortion. 7 in 10 people overall support gay marriage, including about half of Republicans. Only 1 in 3 Christians believe intercourse outside of marriage is never acceptable, with evangelicals making a good portion of that. And while many believe that people are either born biologically male or female, it simply isn't true. unless you ignore the existence of intersex people. Now, why would someone do this? If these people are born this way, wouldn't that be God's will? I'd wager that it's easier for them to ignore their existence or call them blasphemous because they have an agenda, and the mere existence of intersex people serves to undermine everything. One person left a review saying that there are a bunch of fake Christians at Rock Point Church who won't help you unless you attend it. Now, the next guest I want to talk about is Bob Russell, who was the lead pastor at Southeast Christian Church in Louisville, Kentucky for 40 years. Nowadays, he speaks at conferences across the nation and provides mentorship to pastors through Bob Russell Ministries. It seems Bob and Southeast Christian Church hold values that are similar to Terry Thompson. Bob answers questions from people asking about the Bible online. In response to one question, he stated, "The Bible clearly states that God has created us male and female. The world has come to believe Satan's lie that homosexuality is a gender instead of a behavior." First, I want to point out that he's ignoring the existence of intersex people, whether willingly or not, whose genders don't fit neatly into male or female. Secondly, I've never heard anyone ever say that homosexuality is a gender. It just doesn't make sense. It's a sexuality, not a gender. That alone should make you question if he's someone with good intentions or not. I honestly can't tell if he genuinely believes this or if he's laughing behind his followers' backs because he knows it's just a bunch of bullcrap and people will follow him and listen to him anyway. One of Bob's acquaintances, or possibly friends, Dr. David Reagan, had some interesting things to say about the gullibility of Christians. He says Christians as a whole tend to be rather naive and gullible. All a person with a weird idea or preposterous theory has to do is mention the name of Jesus several times, and Christians tend to swallow what he has to say. Hook, line, and sinker. I wonder if David has rubbed off on Bob at all. I won't even argue against homosexuality being a behavior because I likely won't be able to change your mind if that's what you already believe. What I will ask of you is to simply seek out the LGBT community and have a conversation with them. More importantly, don't do it to argue, simply listen. No matter how much any pastor, preacher, family member, or friend might disapprove of you hearing out the LGBT community, as far as I know, it's not a sin. I'm also not asking you to completely change your worldview all of a sudden. As Mark again once said, people in a position of authority aren't always right or wise or want what's best for the community. So go do some research. How can you honestly say that you've done your research if you get all of your information from all of the people that you only agree with? In this case, it would be one pastor or church. With that said, we're going to go through some of the bad experiences that people have had with Southeast Christian Church together. I can't verify for myself that all of these stories are 100% real, but knowing what Bob believes, it's not exactly a far cry to think that they might be true. They apparently distributed anti-gay stickers for free and ran TV ads against the LGBT community. You can actually read about that in the article on screen. One person said they left Southeast Christian Church because a member on the worship team was asked to leave when the church leadership found out they had intercourse outside of marriage, while the other person was not treated in the same manner. Another person was supposedly told by the church that the reason God wasn't blessing them was because of their divorce. Seriously? Catherine on Facebook said that while the church seems welcoming initially, deviating from the norm will lead to being treated harshly. Heather noted that there were no people of color in leadership positions at Southeast Christian when she attended the church. If true, Andrea T's story exposes Southeast Christian's greed. Andrea says her friend donated his time, money, blood, sweat, and tears to the church, and that he was there whenever the church needed him. But the minute that he came out as gay, he was made to feel as uncomfortable as possible, causing him to leave the church. And when he stopped sending his 15% tithings to the church, they called not to apologize or to bring him back, but in order to get their money. Andrea called them thieves and bullies. If you don't like what Terry and Bob believe, you really won't be happy to hear about the eagerly self-titled Christian nationalist Alex McFarland. He essentially blamed Bernie Sanders and progressives as a whole for a shooting that happened in Virginia in 2017. In response to the shooting, Alex had this to say: "Unfortunately, some people live out the worldview of the progressives, and in this case, the worldview of Bernie Sanders, where if you don't like what's going on, you do anything you can to stop it." If you somehow don't know anything about Bernie Sanders, he's someone who's tried to push gun control to stop shootings like the one in Virginia. Of course, Bernie condemned not just the shooting, but all violence in society. He says the only way to bring about real change is through nonviolent action, and that anything else runs counter to our most deeply held American values. Isn't this rhetoric exactly what many, if not all, conservatives call out? Actually, wait, it is. In fact, Alex is whining about the same thing that he's doing right now. Alex has cried about the use of language to smear opposition. According to him, woke, globalists, and Marxists have taken the leveraging of language to new heights, or should I say depths. Good one, Alex. They want you to believe all honest disagreement comes from places of racism and fear, so they smear their opposition as hateful and phobic. In the minds of woke activists, that's all that any of the rest of us are. Do I really need to point out the irony of him calling everyone who honestly disagrees with him a globalist and Marxist? Or that by implying that Bernie and progressives as a whole are to blame for the shooting, that he's smearing the opposition as hateful, which is the same thing he's whining about? I'm sure many, if not all of you, have heard at least one conservative complain about being labeled a Nazi, right? Well, Alex goes on to do the exact same. He says America's lefties would have been enforcing the Star of David in 1941. You've got to be kidding me. He's either a massive hypocrite who needs to take the plank out of his eye, or he knows exactly what he's doing. He's probably joining in with Bob Russell and Dr. David Reagan, laughing behind everyone's backs because they think we're dumb. While he's getting everyday people to fight over nonsense, he knows he'll never have to struggle the way that we all do. It's probably why he hates Bernie, the person who's dedicated his life to fighting for the common person. If we ever realize that we have more in common than we think, then Alex's ramblings would become irrelevant. And surely he can't have that. Wouldn't you cry for poor Alex if he had to live like the rest of us? If he actually had to try to do something to improve people's lives and unite them despite their differences like Bernie, instead of dividing us? Just imagine how terrible that would be for him, regardless of what a hack like Alex has to say. Yes, I, as some who might call a woke lefty, believe it's possible to be a conservative without being hateful or phobic. I don't want to get too deep into it, but everyone's fiscal views and social views are on different spectrums, and there's just far too many unique combinations to be able to say otherwise. To state the obvious, everyone's different. But when it comes to Alex, yes, he is someone who's hateful and who uses fear to manipulate people. In a TV interview on Focus Today, Alex stated that he honestly believed Obama was a Muslim.
Around the world. Yeah, I mean, in my heart, I'm going to be honest with you. I suspect he is a Muslim. I really do.
Mark said that we shouldn't spread rumors, so why is he okay with Alex spreading that rumor? If you really want to dive into all of the disinformation that's been spread about Obama, I recommend this article that I'm showing on screen right now. But to keep it short, yes, Obama is a Christian, and he was born in the United States, I assure you. I have to ask again, why would someone say these things that are so easily disprovable? It's because it's easy to manipulate people who are afraid. That's why in that same interview he rambled on and on about how Islam is a dangerous and aggressive religion.
And so Islam is not, quote, one of the great monotheistic religions of the world. It's been a violent, aggressive, autocratic system from its beginning. And right now, the entire safety of the world is imperiled. And this is an ideology that will breed bloodshed if it's allowed to be unaddressed.
He was trying to connect Obama to something dangerous to keep people afraid. It's one thing to try to appeal to people's fear when there's overwhelming evidence for a claim, and it's another to make up stories like J.D. Vance and Alex. Realistically, if you already believe these things about Obama and Islam, I won't be able to change your mind. So allow me to appeal to your fear just as Alex has, by exposing his anti-constitutional, anti-American beliefs. Hey, at least I'm being upfront about it, right? In his interview, Alex states that America was founded as a Christian nation.
America was founded as a Christian nation. All of our governmental philosophies draw themselves from Christianity.
Now, a lot of you would, again, happily agree with that. That simply isn't true. Look to the First Amendment if you wish. But I'm not even going to argue with you about that. For the sake of argument, I'm going to say that you're right, and that America was founded as a Christian nation. Now, I ask you, dear viewer, do you think he means your type of Christian? Keep in mind, Alex is an evangelical Christian, so if you're a Catholic, that means no. If you're not an evangelical Christian, also no. If you're an evangelical Christian but you diverge on one of his views, that also means no. There are over 200 Christian denominations in the United States alone. You may or may not agree about his views on Islam, and if you do, that might make you feel like you're allies. But even if Alex was successful in snuffing out Islam as a religion, who do you think would be next? To quote him, "The judgment of God will only escalate until we turn to the Lord." I think what he really meant was his version of the Lord. As the saying goes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. But what happens when your friend suddenly becomes your enemy? Thankfully, we have a lot of history that we can turn to find out exactly what happens when anti-constitutional Christian nationalists like Alex McFarland get their way. All throughout history, you'll find violence justified in the name of the Lord. Just take a look at this graphic that I found on Wikipedia. These wars, dating back to the 15th century, were fought between the different denominations of Christianity in Europe alone. In the United States, Missouri Governor Lilburn Boggs declared that the Mormons must be treated as enemies and must be exterminated or driven from the state. In the 1840s, Catholics were subject to mob violence. Their property was burned and some were even killed. This violence was fed by claims that the Catholics were destroying the culture of the United States. According to this paper by Eric Wong, the period after the Revolutionary War saw a lot of infighting between the various states and Christian denominations. Virginia, which was home to the largest portion of Anglicans loyal to the Church of England, was the scene of notorious acts of religious persecution against Baptists and Presbyterians. Anglicans physically assaulted Baptists, bearing theological and social animosity. In 1771, a local Virginia sheriff yanked a Baptist preacher from the stage at his parish and beat him to the ground outside, where he also delivered 20 lashes with a horsewhip. Even when Christians share many beliefs among each other, it's still not enough for them to get along. Okay, well, what about when the different denominations unite to fight for an issue they believe in? One issue our founding fathers and the large majority of Christians fought for was the right to keep slaves. Alex believes the Bible forbids slavery and that slavery was abolished nationally, largely due to Christian influence. He's correct in stating that Christians had a large influence in abolishing slavery, but what he conveniently leaves out is that Christians were largely the ones perpetuating it. Do I really need to reiterate why someone would leave out such key information? Remember, he was the one praising our founding fathers and claiming that our nation was built on Christian morals and values. Ironically, had he been alive back then, he likely would have been the target of many attacks on his character, and possibly physical ones as well, by none other than the Christians that he holds in such high regards. Allow me to tell you a little bit about one Christian who spoke out against slavery and in favor of women's suffrage, Angelina Emily Grimke. Grimke was the daughter of distinguished South Carolina slaveholders. She was raised in the Episcopal Church, but she converted to the more evangelical Presbyterian Church at a young age. She was always outspoken, but she increasingly became convinced that slavery was an immoral and unchristian system that denied human rights. Expelled by the Southern Presbyterians for her views on slavery and the equality of women, she left the South for Philadelphia and joined the Religious Society of Friends, known as the Quakers, another evangelical group that had been the earliest and most ardent opponents of slavery. She knew she needed to use the Bible if she wanted to convince Christians, who so readily pointed to chapters in the book of Leviticus to support owning slaves, that it was wrong. So, in 1836, she called on women to fight for the abolitionist cause in her piece entitled Appeal to the Christian Women of the South. Copies of her essay were burned publicly in South Carolina, and even the Philadelphia Quakers felt that she had gone too far. Hopefully, we all know what happened next. The Civil War was fought between the North and the South, pitting even families against each other. It was no easy task to get everyone on the same page about freedom, even among fellow Christians. Without the freedom of and from religion that the First Amendment grants us, perhaps slavery would have never been abolished. This ties into the concept of Christian nationalism. You may be wondering what Christian nationalism is, how it applies to Alex, and why you should be concerned about it. If you were to ask Alex, you might actually start to believe that it's a good thing. On a podcast, he tried to equate being a nationalist with being a patriot or proud Christian. Unfortunately for him, a patriot and a nationalist are not the same thing. I wouldn't be surprised to find out that he's intentionally trying to mislead people. Dictionary.com makes the distinction between patriotism and nationalism quite well, though I encourage you to do your own research as well. They say that patriotism is used for various positive sentiments, attitudes, and actions involving loving one's country and serving the greater good of all its people. Nationalism is used for political ideologies and movements that promote a more extreme and exclusionary love of one's country, at the expense of foreigners, immigrants, and even people in a country who aren't believed to belong in some way, often on racial and religious grounds. So, for example, a Christian nationalist like Alex McFarland might try to establish one single religion and base all of a country's laws on that religion, while trying to suppress others' rights to practice their own religion freely. He praised France for closing down mosques. I'll even play the clip for you.
Are we appeasing it by allowing it to be a religion and not an ideology? I mean, can we afford to allow this thing to go? And the president of France now is starting to dismantle mosques. I mean, whoa.
More power to him. More power to him.
Of course, even the First Amendment has its limits. But after reading these two stories about the mosques that have been closed in France, you just know that that wouldn't fly here in the United States. It would be unconstitutional. Even France's top court had to roll back one of the closures, saying that it was a serious and patently illegal violation of the freedom of worship. So that is what he is praising. So yes, Alex McFarland is an anti-constitutionalist, anti-American Christian nationalist. The kind of rhetoric that Alex uses also mirrors that of Adolf Hitler, who was a nationalist. There are many debates about Hitler's true religious beliefs, but that's going to be irrelevant for our conversation today. What is relevant, however, is what he claimed to believe. In Mein Kampf, he stated, "Hence today I believe that I am acting in accordance with the will of the Almighty Creator. By defending myself against the Jew, I am fighting for the work of the Lord." Switch out Jew for Muslim, and what you get is something that you could easily imagine Alex saying. When Hitler obtained power in 1933, 95% of Germans were Christian, 63% were Protestant, and 32% were Catholic. There was simply no way he could gain power and keep it without the support of Christians. So he used Christianity to manipulate people into committing atrocities. Isn't it interesting then that Alex tells his fellow Christians to embrace the term Christian nationalist? Perhaps Alex has learned plenty from Adolf Hitler and David Reagan, that if you praise Jesus or God enough times, people will follow you despite the actual content of what you say. People like Alex are dangerous. His kind of rhetoric will push people into extremism. That I'm sure of. So, what does Mark Sanders think about Alex McFarland? Here are a couple of posts on social media. If you're looking for a ministry to support in 2025, Alex McFarland Ministries should be at the top of your list. If you have Bible questions, no one is more qualified to answer them than Dr. Alex McFarland. Even Mark's wife, Connie, says Alex is a great speaker and a great guy. Mark and Connie, I'd love to know, do you still believe he's a great guy and that he deserves a platform at your church? Do Bob and Terry, members of the school board of the Community Schools of Frankfort, Are these values in line with our schools? I watched the live special meeting on the 11th of February where he was officially given the position, and there weren't any reasons given as to why he was chosen. One person spoke up, and all they said was that it was close. Did you really not look into who you were choosing, or did you know exactly what you were doing? I really hope I just missed a post somewhere justifying choosing him. Now, you might be asking why I care so much, as it's only a position on a school board, right? In this case, we weren't able to elect our school board representative, so we deserve to know all the facts on why he was chosen. Is Mark someone who is actually qualified, or is there a different reason? Second, oftentimes people use a position on the school board as a stepping stone to a more desired office, such as on a city council or as mayor, or perhaps more. Third, I want to know if we can trust Mark and the school board to make decisions that are in the best interest of all students, whatever their religion or identity or anything else might be, and not to advocate for things in their self-interest. Right now, he isn't someone I can personally trust, not after looking into the people that he gets guidance from, the people that he praises, and the voices that he amplifies. Everyone, of course, is entitled to their own opinion, and this is mine. And really, I just want to say this isn't meant to be a personal attack on Mark and Connie. I'm not going to say that they're terrible people, because I just don't know enough about them to say that. But what I will say is that the people that they are associating with aren't the most trustworthy. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for hearing me out. Bye for now.